I'm gonna read what I read last night because I was falling asleep the whole time. The server piped the answers in the treble. I often thought it would be better to have boy servants, up to 15 or so. After that, of course. Holy water that was, I expect. Shaking sleep out of it. He must be fed up with that job, shaking that thing over all the corpses they trot up. What harm if he could see what he was shaking it over? Every mortal day a fresh batch. Middle-aged men, old women, children, women dead in childbirth, men with beards, bald-headed businessmen, consumptive girls with little sparrows' breasts. All the year round he played the same thing over them, all and shook water on top of them. Sleep. Unding him now. In Paradisum. Said he was going to paradise, or is in paradise. Says that over everybody. Tiresome kind of a job. But he has to say something. The priest closed his book and went off, followed by the server. Corny Kelleher opened the side doors, and the grave diggers came in, hoisted the coffin again, carried it out, and shoved it on their cart. Corny Kelleher gave one wreath to the boy and one to the brother-in-law. All followed them out of the side doors into the mild gray air. Mr. Bloom came last, folding his paper again into his pocket. He gazed gravely at the ground till the coffin cart wheeled off to the left. The metal wheels ground the gravel with a sharp grating cry, and the pack of blunt boots followed the barrow along a lane of sepulchres. The ree, the ra, the ree, the ra, the roo. Lord, I mustn't lilt here. The O'Connell Circle, Mr. Dedalus said about him. Mr. Power's soft eyes went up to the apex of the lofty cone. He's at rest. Where's my highlighter? He's at rest, he said in the middle of his people. Old Nano. But his heart is buried in Rome. How many broken hearts are buried there, Simon? Her grave is over there, Jack, Mr. Dedalus said. I'll soon be stretched beside her. Let him take me whenever he likes. So his name is Jack Powers? Breaking down, he began to weep to himself quietly, stumbling a little in his walk. Mr. Power took his arm. Mr. Power took his arm. He began to weep to himself quietly, stumbling a little in his walk. She's better where she is, he said kindly. I suppose so, Mr. Dedalus said with a weak gasp. I suppose she is in heaven if there is a heaven. Corny Kelleher stepped aside from his rank and allowed the mourners to plod by. Sad occasions, Mr. Kernan began politely. Mr. Bloom closed his eyes and sadly twice bowed his head. The others are putting on their hats, Mr. Kernan said. I suppose we can do so too. We are the last. This cemetery is a treacherous place. They covered their heads. The reverend gentleman read the service too quickly. Don't you think? Mr. Kernan said with reproof. Mr. Bloom nodded gravely, looking in the quick bloodshot eyes. Secret searching eyes. Mason, I think. Not sure. Beside him again. We are the last. In the same boat. Hope he'll say something else. Mr. Kernan added, the service of the Irish Church used in Mount Jerome is simpler, more impressive, I must say. Mr. Bloom gave prudent assent. The language, of course, was another thing. Mr. Kernan said with solemnity, I am the resurrection and the life. That touches a man's inmost heart. It does, Mr. Bloom said. Your heart, perhaps, but what price the fellow in the 6 feet by 2 with his toes to the daisies? No touching that. Seat of the affections. Broken heart. A pump, after all, pumping thousands of gallons of blood every day. One fine day it gets bunged up, and there you are. Lots of them lying around here. Lungs, hearts, livers. Old rusty pumps. Damn the thing else. The resurrection and the life. Once you are dead, you are dead. That last day idea. Knocking them all up out of their graves. Come forth, Lazarus. And he came 5th and lost the job. Get up. Last day. Then every fellow mousing around for his liver and his lights and the rest of his traps. Fine damn all of himself that morning. Pennyweight of powder in a skull. 12 grams, 1 pennyweight. Troy measure. Corny Kelleher fell into step at their side. Everything went off, AI, he said. What? He looked on them from his drawling eye. Policeman's shoulders, with your touraloom, touraloom. As it should be, Mr. Kernan said. What? Eh? Corny Kelleher said. Mr. Kernan assured him. Who is that chap behind with Tom Kernan? John Henry Menton asked. I know his face. Ned Lambert glanced back. Bloom, he said. Madam Marion Tweedy, that was. Bloom, he said. Madam Marion Tweedy, that was. I mean. The soprano. She's his wife. Oh, to be sure, John Henry Menton said. I haven't seen her for some time. She was a fine-looking woman. I danced with her, 15, 17 golden years ago at Matt Dillon's in Roundtown, and a good armful she was. He looked behind through the corners. What is he asked. What does he do? He looked behind through the others. What is he asked. What does he do? Wasn't he in the stationery line? I fell foul of him one evening, I remember, at bowls. Ned Lambert smiled. Yes, he was, he said in Wisdom Helly's, a travel for blotting paper. In God's name, John Henry Menton said, what did she marry a coon like that for? She had plenty of game in her then. Has still, Ned Lambert says. He has some canvassing for ads. He does some canvassing for ads. John Henry Menton's large eyes stared ahead. The barrow turned into a side lane. A portly man, ambushed among the grasses, raised his hat in homage. The grave diggers touched their caps. John O'Connell, Mr. Power said, pleased. He never forgets a friend. Mr. O'Connell shook all their hands in silence. Mr. Daedalus said, I am come to pay you another visit. My dear Simon, the caretaker answered in a low voice. I don't want your custom at all. Saluting Ned Lambert and John Henry Menton, he walked on at Martin Cunningham's side, puzzling 2 keys at his back. Did you hear that one? He asked them about Mulcahy from the Coombe. Saluting Ned Lambert and John Henry Menton, He walked on at Martin Cunningham's side, puzzling two keys at his back, trying to figure out who he is. Mr. Daedalus. Yeah, it was Mr. Daedalus, I think. Did you hear that one? He asked them about Mulcahy from the Coombe. I did not, Martin Cunningham said. They bent their silk hats in concert, and Hines inclined his ear. The caretaker hung his thumbs in the loops of his gold watch chain and spoke in a discreet tone to their vacant smiles. They tell the story, he said, that two drunks came out here one foggy evening to look for the grave of a friend of theirs. They asked for Mulcahy from the Coombe and were told where he was buried. After traipsing about in the fog, they found the grave, sure enough. One of the drunks spelt out the name, Terence Mulcahy. The other drunk was blinking up at a statue of our Savior the widow had got put up. The caretaker blinked up at one of the sepulchres. The other drunk was blinking up at a statue of our Savior the widow had got put up. The caretaker blinked up at one of the sepulchres they passed. He resumed. And after blinking up at the sacred figure, not a bloody bit like the man, says he. That's not Mulcahy, says he, whoever done it. Rewarded by smiles, he fell back and spoke with Corny Kelleher, accepting the dockets given him, turning them over and scanning them as he walked. That's done with a purpose, Martin Cunningham explained to Hines. I know, Hines said, I know that. To cheer a fellow up, Martin Cunningham said. It's pure good-heartedness. Damn the thing else. Mr. Bloom admired the caretaker's prosperous bulk. All want to be on good terms with him. Decent fellow, John O'Connell. Real good sort. Keys. Like Key's ad. No fear of anyone getting out. No pass-out checks. Habeat corpus. I must see about that ad after the funeral. Did I write Ballsbridge on the envelope I took to cover when she disturbed me writing to Martha? Hope it's not chucked. I'll continue later.